What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the W.A.D.E Concept MMA Weekly. First off, I want to apologize because I have no idea what YouTube is doing with my thumbnails right now. I've been in contact with them all day. I can't seem to figure out what's going on with why that the YouTube thumbnail is what it was from the fight night we just did. I'm not sure about that, but thank you guys anyway for joining me today. I know that's going to throw off a little bit of people and not sure on what's going on because the thumbnail's not what it should be, but we'll get through it. Anyway, for those of you that do watch this and do get in here and join me, thank you all. Today, we're going to do something a little bit more inclusive of the UFC, MMA, Bellator sphere. We're going to talk UFC 220. We're going to talk about some news that's coming out about later UFC dates that I think is very interesting. And we're going to talk about Bellator 192 today, a little bit. Again, I know I told you guys I wanted to get more familiar with Bellator. I wanted to get more, access to what they're doing over there, and I think I want to start that with 192. Now, 192 and UFC 220 are on the same night, so this is kind of granted, UFC is on pay-per-view. Bellator is going to be on free TV, but this is kind of going head-to-head between the two brands. Kelsey's already in the chat. She's the only one that's probably going to be watching today because my thumbnails are misleading, to say the least. So we'll have to figure that out hopefully before Saturday because I want to get you guys in here. Again, I sincerely apologize. I don't know why it is doing that, but we'll have it figured out hopefully by Saturday night. Anyway, thank you guys for coming in. What's up, cutie? All right, let's get right into it then. So I think what we'll do is we will save predictions for UFC 220 until the very last part of the show today. And we'll do some predictions for 192, for Bellator 192 as well. Just because I want to go into that one a little bit more as well and show you guys kind of what I think about that card. But we'll start off with a little bit of interesting news coming out of this week, which was... well, first we'll start with something that happened on the fight night card that just happened with Uriah Hall. And if you guys watched the live stream of that, you noticed that Uriah Hall was sidelined and that his fight against Vitor Belfort didn't go on. It was scratched from the card because Uriah Hall had suffered the effects of weight cutting and had to be taken to the hospital. Now, details on that did not come out until a little bit later, and now we kind of fully have what happened. So Dana White has gone on record saying, he had heard that Uriah Hall wasn't taking the weight cut seriously, that he was at the UFC Performance Institute and wasn't really listening to the coaches, kind of doing his own thing as far as nutrition was going. And also that he had been partying that Friday in Los Angeles, I want to say. I don't know, how true any of that is. That's Dana White speaking from what he heard. But we did get a report out, I think, today from Ariel Helwani had reported on, I think it was, who had the story first? It was a story from Peter Carroll, and it said it was probably, Uriah Hall in his own words, said it was probably the most traumatic experience he'd ever had. And it said he'd suffered a mini seizure and a slight heart attack from his effects in weight cutting coming out of that fight, or coming out of that weight cut, which is very dangerous. It looked like Uriah Hall was partying either the day or 2 days before the fight. So that Friday, he was out, in LA. This is according to Dana White, partying, kind of having a good time. And I don't know if that, obviously it would have affected it. Tristan, what's going on? What's going on? Sorry about the thumbnails, my man. I know not everybody is in here today, which is unfortunate, but I'm glad you're in here. If McGregor ends up fighting Woodley, I'm going to be pissed. I don't think Conor McGregor is going to fight Tyron Woodley. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about more what I think Conor McGregor's path is, at least in the near future. We'll talk about that in 1 second. But I don't think he's going to be fighting Woodley, at least not anytime soon. It would be cool to see maybe down the road if what happens, what I think is going to happen, comes to fruition. But as of right now, you're right. I don't want to see that fight either. I think Tyron needs to fight a contender, not either, and we'll talk about what happens with Conor. But yeah, with Uriah Hall, he said it's the most traumatic experience he'd ever had. He was out of it. And again, completely ignored the UFC's Performance Institute nutrition team. So if that's the case, and he's ignoring medical professionals, and he still is not quite clicking for him, he's 33, I think. And I'm a big Uriah Hall fan, but this is probably the end point for him. And as far as in either that or move up to 205, because you're not going to be a competitor at 185 if you can't make the cut and you can't take it seriously. Then how are you going to take your fight seriously? There's a couple of guys that used to train with him that came out and spoke, and they were saying he always brought it when it came to the training room. He always worked on what he needed to work on. But maybe it's just, Tristan, maybe it's just his mental, aptitude for fighting isn't there. Maybe it's just one of those things where he's doing it because he gets money to do it and he's skilled at it. I played college football and I saw a bunch of guys, skiing. I saw a bunch of guys that had enormous talents, but could care less if didn't go to the weight room, didn't work out, didn't catch passes, didn't do the things they needed to do, didn't stay in the classroom, and could care less if they played or not. They were just that good to where that they would show up, and if they had to play or they felt like playing that day, they would take over a game. And it's the same kind of thing you see with Tyron Woodley, with Uriah Hall. But if he can't take the weight cut seriously and he can't be professional, which, again, I think this, if anything, would wake you up and say, okay, either we need to stop weight cutting or we need to take it seriously, because the man was close. I mean, that's as close as you can get to being pronounced dead, having a heart attack and a seizure. So hopefully, he finds a way to either wrap his mind around what really is going on in his career and try to salvage that and either move up to 205 or like I said, take it seriously. But I just thought that was an interesting story because I didn't hear much about it for the first couple days after we had talked about it on Sunday. But we hear about it now, and I think it's interesting to see from him. Now, moving on, this is kind of what Tristan was talking about, so I'll just get right into it. Derek Lewis is that's a good comparison. Derek Lewis, great skilled fighter, heavy hands, but you can tell he is just not. I mean, he has to cut to get to heavyweight, which is crazy, to 265. But you can tell that this isn't his first love. This isn't his first passion. It's not something that he really wants to do as much as he probably has to do it. And there's a lot of fighters. You could probably go down the list of fighters that would probably want to do something else but can't, because this is what they're skilled at. They're the best thing. They're the best at punching guys square in the face, and it's unfortunate, and you can see it in a lot of guys too. You can see the guys that really love this and really want this more than anything, like a Rory McDonald, who I watched today. I went back and watched him fight Tyron Woodley, and man, that guy is just outside of and we'll talk about it in a second, but outside of the UFC and maybe even with the UFC, that might be the best 170-pounder in the world. And Rory McDonald, I don't talk about him a lot, just because he hasn't been very active lately, but he's fighting Douglas Lima Saturday, and he beat Tyron Woodley. Granted, it was a couple years ago, but he might very well be the best 170er in the world. Still young too, still very young for as much as as many fights as he's had. That guy, you'll see him back in the UFC very soon if Bellator doesn't, because I know he's already had some issues with Bellator, and then today even he came out that he was very, almost shocked and disappointed he wasn't the main event. And the main event went to Chael Sonnen and Rampage Jackson over him, two fighters that are pretty much over the hill. And, granted, it is the heavyweight tournament, and I understand you want to make that the main event in every card it's on, because at the end of the day, you're pushing that tournament to be, the premier difference in the MMA world, the one thing that you're doing that no one else is really doing right now. So I get that. But again, Roy McDonald, you might want to keep that guy happy, because he's going to be a champion in whatever company and organization he steps into. So let's move forward a little bit to talking about so let's talk about the news we kind of heard this week. So if you guys didn't hear, the UFC, Dana White, has announced that Tony Ferguson, versus Khabib Nurmagomedov will be taking place on, I think, March 7th, I want to say. I think it's March 7th or April 7th. Anyway, it's going to be taking place on UFC 223 is going to be the headliner on that card. And this is kind of come, no surprise to me, but it's come as a surprise to a lot of people thinking that that Conor might be back to defend his title in the next couple of months. But what it looks like is, and this is kind of what I said, if you guys go back and watch, I'm telling you, I'm basically Mystic Mac nowadays. I'm basically Mystic Mac. Because what I said was, what I thought would happen was I thought Conor would vacate. I thought Tony would fight Khabib, which is going to happen, UFC 223. Kelsey's not. You're not Mystic Mac, Kels. Chill out. I'm Mystic Mac. But yeah, Khabib's going to fight Tony at UFC 223, and what's probably going to happen is they're going to give Conor the winner. As crappy as it sounds, they're going to give, because if you strip a guy, usually you think, okay, he got stripped, back of the bus, like back to the back of the line, work your way back up. It would have happened with George St. Pierre had he continued to fight at 185. But with Conor, he's a different animal. He is your biggest draw. I think the number came out this year, as much as Dana White was saying how 2017 was the best year in the UFC financially, best year. Well, financially, it was about a 55% decrease in value of the company because you saw, a 55% decrease in pay-per-view revenue, which is not the value of the company, but 55% decrease in pay-per-view revenue. Where you saw, I think it was one less event or two less events in 2016 generated more $8 million. So $8 million over 11 events in 2016 versus 3.3 or $3.7 million in 2017 with two more events. So your pay-per-view buys are down drastically. Your business is not doing well, and the one guy that can turn all that around is Conor McGregor, right? Put the Conor McGregor counter up already. But he's the one guy that can do it. And if you want to build a super fight in a country which, in all intents and purposes, the UFC is booked Moscow, it looks like late in the year, or not late in the year, but late summer, early fall, as one of their pay-per-view venues, I would assume. I don't think they do a fight night there. 2017 was a great year for MMA. There's the difference, Tristan. And this is a lot of what I get asked a lot, from my friends or whoever. They're like, man, the UFC's doing so well. They're doing really great. And they are, as far as the fights themselves. The fighters in the UFC right now, there's never been a better talent level than the fighters in UFC. And the fights themselves are amazing fights. But for the general consumer of those products that aren't, myself, you, MMA fanatics, MMA fans, people that don't keep up with the sport but know pop culture and know that guy is a bad dude, that's the baddest guy on the planet, and want to watch him fight, whoever it is, or girl, whoever it is, they're not coming and watching these fights because there is no Ronda Rousey, there is no Brock Lesnar, and last year there wasn't any Conor McGregor. And so when that happens and you have to build new stars, the UFC isn't properly going about doing that. And, we can get into a whole thing on what they need to be doing better. But, part of it is not marketing their bigger guys, not marketing their champions like a Stipe Miocic, like an Amanda Nunes, not even a Rose Namajunas, but not marketing them the way they need to be marketed, not promoting them to the public and showing them, hey, this is the new guy. And then, kind of favoring fighters as well. You can see it with Francis Ngannou. You can see it with Cody Garbrandt, which I'm a big Garbrandt fan. You saw it with Ronda Rousey. But when that happens and you don't pay as much attention and you don't, give people the credit they deserve, the public's not going to give them the credit either. And the own company won't promote them. Then what's the public to jump behind them? Why would they want to jump in and say, that's our guy? They don't know anything about the person. So for the fights themselves and the fighters themselves, 2017 was a great year for MMA. And in Bellator, it's been a great year business-wise. But For the UFC, it was a down year, and that's not the end of the world. They're not going anywhere. It's just a down year, and you have to figure out a way to return to where you were. And I think that's by doing what they used to do in the UFC, which is promote fighters based on their merit. Granted, Conor McGregor's a unicorn. He's somebody else that just takes over, and his personality is so infectious and so, confident that the UFC didn't have to do much. He promoted himself. But these other fighters, that doesn't make them any less of a fighter, doesn't make them any less marketable. It's just this guy knows how to market himself. The UFC is a promotional company. They should promote fighters. Even though I want McGregor to fight Ferguson, it looks like, yeah. This is the thing. I want Conor to fight Tony. But man, I also want, Conor to fight Khabib. And I also want Tony to fight Khabib. So it's this weird thing where you have all three of these guys in this space, but what's going to happen is, and what I was trying to finish my thought on was Tony and Khabib are going to fight UFC 223. The winner of that fight's going to get Conor, and I don't have any shadow of a doubt. It's a win-win for everybody, really. Now, granted, people will call Conor a shill, and he didn't defend his title, and he's a paper champion, and that's fine. Those people will be there, but all that gets erased if Conor comes back and fights the winner of this Khabib-Tony fight and beats him, right? That's a big if, because I don't think Conor matches up well with Khabib at all, and I don't think he matches up well with Tony later in the rounds. But you're talking about the UFC making a great business move because people will tune in for this fight. Khabib is huge in Russia, huge. He has a multitude of fans. Which guy do you think will give Khabib more problems? Tony will, I think. It just depends. I think Tony gives Khabib more problems because Tony can survive, and he's really good off of his back. He's really slick off of his back. Now, his wrestling is I can't tell you enough how Tony has great wrestling. His ankle picks, amazing. Single legs, great. But it's not going to mean shit in this fight. Khabib's wrestling, it will dominate Tony's wrestling every single day of the week. His sambo, his pressure will dominate. Now, the thing that worries me about Tony is how much of a fit Kevin Lee gave him early on the ground. How easily Kevin Lee got him to the ground and was ground and pounding on him in the first round. Tony almost was relying on Kevin Lee to gas, a little bit. Like, he was standing in front of him. He was getting picked off with some of Kevin Lee's stand-up as well. And then when Lee took the fight to the ground, especially late in that first round, toward the end of the round, he was landing big shots on Tony, and Tony looked like he was in a little bit of trouble. Granted, Kevin Lee gassed. Tony caught him in the triangle into the fight, but I don't know if he can do that to Khabib. I don't know if because Khabib's not going to sit in your guard and just wail on you. He does that weird, when he gets you on the cage in his sambo, he clamps his legs around your legs. You can't put him in your guard. He starts just beating you, and you try to get up. He just throws you back down and almost like a spider clamps your legs up again. There's not a lot you can do. But if anyone does have a chance on the ground as far as, using their jiu-jitsu to try to mitigate what Khabib can do, because Khabib's going to put you on the ground. If you don't catch him before, while he's coming in, and I don't think Tony has the technical striking to catch him coming in, he will catch you. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Tristan. The way, and you go back and watch the Kevin Lee fight, and people are like, oh, Kevin Lee just wasn't on Tony's level. Tony was on a different level. Cardio-wise, Tony is a freak. He's on a different level. But Kevin Lee with staff, I hate to give guys excuses, but he walked in there with staff, looked like he was about to die the day before, and smashed Tony for the first round and a half. Smashed him. And and Khabib doesn't look like he has a cardio issue. The issue has always been with Khabib, can he make weight? And when he makes weight, the only fights we have to go on, he's not gassing. And his stand-up's getting better. His pressure is undeniable. He just comes forward on you, and if you don't have oh, absolutely. Kevin Lee's a beast. He's just not quite there yet. He's got a lot of holes he needs to fix as well. His jiu-jitsu obviously is there. And his gas tank, but that'll come. He's a young guy. But with Khabib, you're going to see a guy that just won't get tired. Now, we haven't seen him in a 5-round. And that'll be a war for sure. I don't think Tony is you're going to have to take it from Tony. You're going to have to either knock him out, submit him, or, just dominate like Khabib does and get the UNAN, because Tony's not going to quit. But I think if Tony has a shot, it has to be, catching something slick on the ground, maybe a darce, which he's really good at. His darces, his triangles are nasty. but I don't see him wrestling with Khabib. I don't even see him doing much damage on the feet with Khabib. He just doesn't. I don't think he has the technical proficiency to really catch a guy like Khabib coming in. But I think he matches up better than Conor because on the ground, Conor will not be able to defend himself against Khabib. There's no chance of Khabib. I think Khabib can last longer than Conor. Khabib, well, here's the thing. Khabib, if he were to fight Conor, this is all hypothetical because we really don't know, even though my opinion is Tony Khabib fight, the winner fights Conor. I think the UFC wants, and I hate to say the UFC wants somebody, versus don't, but if they're going to make a pay-per-view in Russia, and Khabib obviously is who they would like to headline that pay-per-view because he's a icon there, I think they would want Khabib to headline against Conor. Returning Conor because the Russians love Conor too. If you guys go on any type of Instagram page that features Conor McGregor, you'll see a lot of Russian on the comment sections. You'll see a lot of Russian videos of Conor McGregor on YouTube, or he's got a lot of fans in that area. But Khabib owns that area, and you're telling me that the main event of Conor and Khabib at UFC 200 and whatever the hell in Russia, in Moscow, wouldn't do almost 2 million pay-per-view buys? You're crazy. You're crazy. They would sell out in minutes, and everybody would buy that fight because everyone is clamoring for that fight. But before that, this fight is going to be a doozy as well. We'll break it down more when we get to it because there's a lot of film I want to go back and watch on Tony too because Tony beat Edson as well, even though Edson was tuning him up early. Edson Barboza was tuning him up early in that fight. But I want to go back and watch that before I get into who I think is going to win, whatever. Hate to bring up the Johnson fight. The Johnson fight was interesting. I'll say this. A lot of people give Khabib, a chink in Khabib's armor was him fighting Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson landed on him, but when I go back and watch that fight, and Joe Rogan to this day, trust me, I am a disciple of the JRE. I love Joe Rogan's podcast. I think he's, the best in the game doing it. Hopefully I want to be on that level one day. That's the goal for me, is to be on the Joe Rogan level, to have my own podcast, to bring people on and discuss MMA and other subjects. But for now, MMA is my passion, and I talk about it a lot. But when I go back and watch, that was really convoluted to go and make this point. But when I go back and watch that fight, what happened was a lot of people said Michael Johnson wobbled him with the straight left. Or hit the right hand and then the left hook. You go back and watch, and when Michael Johnson hits the right hand, Khabib kind of rolls with it. And when he rolls with it, Michael Johnson comes back over with the left hook, and Khabib deflects, and it moves him, but it didn't wobble Khabib at all. Michael Johnson landed punches for sure, but Khabib didn't get wobbled. He didn't get hurt in that exchange at all. And Joe Rogan gives credence to the fact that hurt him or wobbled him, at least for that split second, like, oh, he's human. Khabib's human. And anybody that's technically a great striker, the difference in Michael Johnson and Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor dictates more pace. Michael Johnson will come forward on you and impose his will, but you get him going backward. He's not the same technical striker as a Conor McGregor is going backward. Conor McGregor invites you to come in so that he can go backward, plant a foot, and then come forward. That's the difference in those two fighters. Conor McGregor dictates the pace of the fight. Michael Johnson goes with the pace of the fight when it's in his favor. When you start to pressure him, the pace changes. He doesn't deal with pressure as well as Conor does. So, yes, I think Conor can land on Khabib. It'll be a very, very short window to do so. And if he can make it through, it'll be a very short window, I'll say, at the beginning of each round if that fight were to take place. Because Conor has a slight window where he can... Thank you, Tristan. Peace out, brother. We'll see you Saturday. But yeah, if he can land in that quick space, it'll be tough. But we'll talk about that fight more when we get there. But yes, that's apparently the news this week, and we kind of all, at least I saw it coming. I think a lot of people in the know of MMA saw this coming. Conor was not going to defend that belt in the first 3 or 4 months like he said he wanted to. They've got a contract dispute going on. He's really trying to, and rightfully so, he's trying to make more money in his next fight, and they're in negotiations. This is giving, the April card is going to give Tony time. I think he just had some surgery. He's going to give him time to get healthy and get back. Khabib is going to be back. It'll be before his, religious duties and with Ramadan and all that. And then after that, obviously, the card in Russia, I think, is what they want to aim for, and they want Khabib, obviously, to be on that card. So the thing, in theory, they'd want Khabib to take this title, fight Conor in September, October, and this card in Russia, and then go from there. It'll be an interesting time when that does happen because, man, that'll be a crazy, crazy. The scenarios in that fight and just leading up to it are so nuts. I'm excited thinking about it, but we'll hang out for now because there's a lot of other stuff we need to talk about. So let's move on. And I want to talk about Bellator before we get into 220. Just really quickly, I don't know a ton about the Bellator card. I know a lot of I know a decent amount about obviously the main event. Other than that, you're going to look at two fights. Other than that I don't particularly know too much about. But we'll look at it. So the Bellator 192 card is going to be, by the way, let's all get a rip in the chat to Spike TV because Spike TV just closed their doors. And that was, a huge factor in the building of MMA as we know it today. For a lot of people that are just coming along now and see the UFC on Fox, that wasn't always the case. The UFC, at least in its inception to cable TV, started on Spike TV. You saw that with, really the TV rights shot up with the first season of The Ultimate Fighter doing so well in the finale, which, paved the way for the TV rights for the UFC on Spike TV for, I think, 7 or 8 years before they signed the Fox deal. And then obviously they sold the company. But when that happened, Bellator had arisen as I don't want to say a competitor, but another MMA promotion, and Spike had taken over them. So without Spike, we wouldn't see modern MMA, and I'm sure we would have in some form, but not in the form we got it. So all props go to them. I hope all the employees at Spike are finding, jobs that are going to be sustainable for them. If you guys didn't see the Spike Twitter handle, the social media guy going off on there, that was really funny. But now the Bellator promotion will be airing on the Paramount Network, which I think basically is Spike, who bought out Spike. So the main card is all we're going to talk about because I have no idea about the prelim cards. Probably should, but I don't. The main card is going to start at 9 Eastern, so that'll be right before the time, like an hour before the UFC 220 card. So I'm going to, what we might do? We might live stream simultaneously both of the cards. I think that would be dope. Kelsey says we should do picks. Okay, we can do picks for Bellator. Do you want to do picks for Bellator and UFC 220? We can do that. That's fine. While I'm doing my picks for UFC 220, or while I'm talking about Bellator, you do your picks in the chat. Let the chat see your picks, and then write them down for yourself. And I'll have them on the live stream Saturday night. And I'm going to do my UFC 220 picks right here. But let's go ahead and talk about the main card, and we'll do picks as we go. So the first fight, Henry Corrales versus Georgi Karamayan. I don't know who these guys are, unfortunately, so I'm going to skip those. But let's go to the second fight. I'm very interested to watch this guy, Aaron Pico. Now, if you guys don't know who Aaron Pico is, he's 21. He fights at featherweight, and he's probably the most hyped MMA prospect I've ever seen. As far as not like, oh, he's just all hype. He meets the hype, and you hear stories about him in the training room with guys like TJ Dillashaw and, any 145 or 155er that you hear about him with, and they talk and they're like, this guy, he's young, but man, he's going to be a handful. And he might have had one of the, a little embarrassment. His first pro fight, he got wobbled and got finished. I think it was a rear naked choke, finished him up pretty early in his first fight with Bellator, but they put him on a main event of one of their cards in his first pro, debut fight. I think it was his first pro fight. And, the guy was 20 at the time, and since then he came back in his second fight with one of the nastiest knockouts I've ever seen with his right hand. I think he's the first kind of wave of this full MMA prospect. This guy that's got great boxing. I think he's, some highly decorated boxer as well as a highly decorated wrestler. And the whole time knowing he was coming into MMA, it wasn't a wrestler that went through college that came to MMA or a high-level kickboxer coming to MMA. This kid is specifically trained to be an MMA star. And for all intents and purposes, he is that star. And so, Bellator has at least one of the prospects I'm sure that the UFC would like to have, and this kid is the real deal. So let's he's fighting a guy, Shane Crutchin. Not much information on this guy, but he is a taller 145 or 6'1". But this will really be, as Aaron Pico goes along, he's 2-1. This will be a story to watch if you guys want to be, follow a guy that's rising, a young guy that you want to become a fan of. This is probably the guy. And he's, like I said, he's one of the most hyped guys ever at his, because a lot of people, again, Conor McGregor count. When Conor was coming out, not a lot of people thought a lot about him other than this guy talks a lot, But people know Aaron Pico's good and in very different aspects. He doesn't have a lot of holes in his game. And so, the biggest thing for him is don't beat yourself, right? Don't let the bright lights beat you, focus in, do what you need to do. And, before long, you'll probably see this guy 10, 11, 12, and 1 or 2 and, fighting for a title. So I'm just going to go ahead and predict this fight because I don't know much about Shane Crutchin and I've seen Aaron Pico. I'm going to go Aaron Pico, vicious knockout, second round. Kels, if you want, like I said, pick your picks in the chat. Let me know. All right. So next up is another fight that, again, I don't know too much about one of the guys, and I know the other guy is a monster. Michael Chandler and, God, these names. W.A.D.E, Yamauchi. I'm sure this guy is a monster himself, but man, I don't know anything about this guy, and I probably just butchered his name. So Michael Chandler, if you guys don't remember, just lost his title by one of the weirdest ways I think I've ever seen somebody lose a title. He got injured in the second round. Rory McDonald, Jackson, Pico. All right, cool. So Kelsey has her picks there. I'll just go opposite, even though I'm not super confident in any of my picks now, because Roy McDonald's going to win that fight. Rampage could very well beat Chael. Aaron Pico's going to win his fight, but I'll take Michael Chandler. Anyway, Michael Chandler had one of the weirdest title defense or title losses I'd ever seen. He hurt himself in the first round of his fight with, can't remember the cat's name. Brent Primus, and he lost, which he was tuning the guy up basically on one foot. I think he'd hurt his ankle or something happened. He couldn't put weight on his front foot, and this Brent Primus guy was kind of trying to land points and stuff, but Michael Chandler was just not able to stand up, and he was adamant about not quitting the fight, and he was trying to fight on one leg, and he even landed a big shot on one leg, and I think he even put Primus down. Obviously, he got back up, but it was crazy. But ended up he had to forfeit the bout because he just couldn't stand up. He was physically unable to continue. He wanted the rematch. I guess Bellator decided to go another way, and now he's taking on apparently a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist who is very dangerous. I don't know a lot about the guy. I'm sure Saturday I'll learn more about him, but I am going to go with Michael Chandler. Just a well-rounded veteran, a guy that is a monster at 155. Probably if he were in the lightweight division in the UFC, would be a top 2 or 3 guy. So we'll go Michael Chandler in that fight. And then to the fight that Kelsey just picked Roy McDonald in. This fight's interesting, man. Douglas Lima just beat, he's no joke, man. Douglas Lima just beat Lorenz Larkin, who in his Bellator debut was supposed to have been one of the guys that was going to fight Roy McDonald, was going to walk through that division. But Douglas Lima, probably the knockout artist in the heaviest or the best knockout artist in Bellator, put him away. So I don't know, why people are sleeping on Douglas Lima like he's, somebody that's not going to compete for this welterweight title in Bellator. I think it's very reasonable to believe that he is going to, he's a competitor at that. He's a competitor at that weight division. Now, Rory McDonald, obviously, I've stated before in the podcast, is probably one of the best 170ers in the world, regardless of stature, division, promotion, anything. He's one of the best 170ers in the world. This guy, Rory McDonald, is so, I guess, passionate and deep into MMA. He wants to be a champion so badly. He wanted to be an alternate for the heavyweight tournament they're having, in Bellator with Chael Sonnen and Rampage and Ryan Bader and Roy Nelson and Matt Mitrione and Fedor. Those guys that walk around, some of them at 230, 240, and Roy McDonald wanted to compete in that tournament as an alternate if someone were to get hurt. The guy just wants to fight. I mean, he's a fighter. He has great technique. He trains at a TriStar with Georges St. Pierre in Montreal. He's a stud. In my opinion, I would love to see a Roy McDonald Tyron Woodley rematch. I think that would be an amazing fight. I think that'd be the real, true best 170er in the world, besides my boy Darren Till, who's coming up there. I'm telling you, watch out. And I would say Kamaru Usman, I just, rang his praises the entire live stream until he fought and didn't look that great. I understand he was super hurt. I think he was saying he was 30%, and a lot of people took offense to that. I think he was 30% health. He probably could have pulled out of that fight and he didn't, which I commend, but when you have a performance like that and then Dana White, kind of rags on you, you lose a little bit of momentum there, but I still think he's one of the best 170ers in the world. But since Kelsey has decided she's going to go with Roy McDonald, I guess I will go Douglas Lima. I think the only chance Douglas Lima has to win this fight is probably by knockout and probably early, because Roy McDonald intends to impose his will on you, and he will take the center of the octagon, especially against an aggressive fighter. We saw it with Tyron Woodley. We saw it with Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler tried to push forward on him the entire fight. Roy McDonald took the center of the octagon and started pushing back. Like, he's not these dangerous strikers he's not afraid of. Obviously, he's not dumb either. He's not going to stand in the pocket and just wing shots at you, but he will put pressure on pressure fighters, because sometimes the most aggressive pressure fighters don't really do well with pressure in their own face. So we'll see. Douglas Lima's got to get a knockout. Has to. And then the main event, which is kind of fun. These guys were matched up in the heavyweight tournament, the Bellator heavyweight tournament, or Grand Prix. They're matched up as, a conflicting style matchup, right? You have Chael Sonnen, who is one of the best grapplers, has been for a long, long time at middleweight and light heavyweight, and I guess now, since he's in the heavyweight Grand Prix in that tournament, versus Rampage Jackson, who has not ever been known for his grappling, but will throw bombs, and when he connects, only takes one. Even at his age, granted, they're not young guys, they're not really spry guys anymore, it still only takes Rampage one shot to connect with you to put the lights out, because Rampage Jackson has always carried power in his hands. He's always been very explosive, and he's a knockout artist. And so this is an interesting fight, because I don't know how many people particularly want to see it anymore. I think more of it is just Chael, needing to be around fighting, because you can tell with him. Excuse me. Oof, a little yawn there. You can tell with him, with fighting, he's got his own YouTube channel now. He's very well spoken. He could probably do commentating for Bellator. I think he wants to do more of that. But for whatever reason, he's a fighter. He's been drawn to grappling tournaments. He was competing in Abu Dhabi. He's always doing something MMA related. And so, at his base core, he's one of these fighters. He's a smart guy, and hopefully he knows when it's time, but he doesn't quite think it's time yet. So he will continue to compete. Rampage kind of been on a tear at Bellator. Granted, he lost to King Mo in a decision, I think, in his return fight to Bellator, but kind of been on a tear. I think he'd won 2 before that. So an interesting fight. Kelsey has Rampage. for Rampage to win. It won't be difficult if he can keep Chael off him. If his takedown defenses improve and he can keep Chael from taking him down. I don't know if that's the case, if he can, because Chael's a great wrestler. His double leg, his ankle pick is there. Rampage can win the fight on the feet. But what I think will happen was Chael will get him to the ground and pound, control position, and hold Rampage down for 3 rounds and win the fight. That's what's going to happen probably. So I'll go with Chael in that fight. It's going to be an interesting card. I'm actually going to, now that I think about it, I didn't think about doing it earlier, but might as well. If it's on, I'll have my TV live streaming the UFC, I'll have my computer live streaming Bellator, and we'll just watch both of them. That'll be cool. So hope you guys join me. Hopefully the thumbnails, again, are right. I'm very, very upset about this. But hopefully they're right so we get more viewers in here and I can, communicate with you guys a little more. I apologize again, guys. I don't know. But lastly, let's go to the card that we've all been waiting for. Really not the card we've all been waiting for, because other than the last 2 fights, there's not a lot of fights that blow your hair back, right? There's the fights we want to see are the light heavyweight championship and the heavyweight championship of the world. And other than that, the UFC 220 card's not crazy good, but we'll predict it anyway. And we'll go over the first fight. So Thomas Almeida versus Rob Font. Rob Font, a pretty balanced fighter. 14-3, been around a while. Not a lot to write home about as far as his potential in this division moving forward. If he were to beat a guy like Thomas Almeida, though, that's a very huge win. Thomas Almeida looking to, gain back the momentum he had before he fought Tony Ferguson. I'm all off. Before he fought Cody Garbrandt. Coming into that fight, both guys were known to have heavy hands and really swing and land big shots. Thomas Almeida obviously fell off a little bit after that fight, and I think he even lost one more after that. But still carries heavy hands, very quick. I mean, they're 135ers, so they're going to be moving very fast. I think that Thomas Almeida gets out of here with either a TKO late third or decision. So we're going to go Thomas Almeida for our first pick of the evening. Thomas Almeida. Now, secondly, and again, I'm breezing through these fights. They are very important. They're fun fights, but they're not the fights we want to see. And I want to talk as much about the main events and the co-main as I can. Now, I'm a big fan of, and you guys can't see it, I have it pulled up. I'm a big fan of John Vellante. He's a training partner with Stipe, training partner with Chris Weidman from New York. Just a great guy. If you watch Dana White's Looking for a Fight, he was on their last episode with Matt Serra. I think Matt Serra is one of his guys, teachers, I wanted to say, or maybe one of his coaches. But just a great guy. You can tell he's just a fun dude and, loves to joke around. I think he, for whatever reason, can't seem to put it together at heavyweight, not quite the way he wants to get into that top 10, top 5 range. He's a big guy, he's a light heavyweight. He's a big guy for light heavyweight too, man. They say he walks around probably 240, 250. They've said, Stipe's come out and said this week that before training camp started, John Vellante was bigger than Stipe was, and Stipe fights heavyweight. That's nuts to me. The cut he has to get down to 205 is super dangerous, obviously, but if he does it the right way, who's to tell him it's wrong or whatever. But I'm a big fan of John Vellante's, and I'm Mr. Bias, all right? I picked Cody Garbrandt because I liked him. I thought he actually could win the fight against TJ. I'll always pick Conor McGregor if he fights, with my heart. Realistically, if he fights Khabib, he might get smashed into oblivion. But I'm going John Vellante, one, because I don't know too much about Francimar Barrasso, and also just the fact that I think John Vellante is a hilarious dude, and I root for him because he wings big shots at light heavyweight. He does gas pretty quickly, but if the fight does stay on its feet, sometimes with a bit more technical striker, he can get tuned up. But whatever. All right, I'm a big John Vellante fan, so we're going with him. And then we have Shane Burgos versus Calvin Kattar. I haven't seen Shane Burgos, and this is terrible. I feel like the worst MMA analyst ever. But these are just, and maybe it's the the detriment of the UFC that I don't know these guys, because I followed the sport very closely. And there are these guys that just slip past me because maybe they're not promoted the right way. Maybe I'm just not doing the research I need to do. But, I for whatever reason, these guys slip right past me. And, sorry, we got to put John Vellante on there. And I don't know too much about him. So, maybe that's the UFC's part. Maybe we need to promote these guys a little better. But I have watched Calvin Kattar fight a couple of times. I like the difference, the variety of options he gives you. He has a lot of finishes with not only his striking, but his submissions, his grappling's good. Does tend to, not be a world beater as far as a finisher, but he will win fights, and he's 17-2 because he's that good. But, there's not a lot of movement in that 145 division. These guys aren't ranked. Hopefully, a win for either of these guys could shoot them into that top 15. This is what they're both looking for. I'm going to go Calvin Kattar because, again, of his variety and his skill set, his veteran savvy, as you would say, his experience in the octagon versus a guy who is 10-0 in Shane Burgos. So maybe I'm just sleeping on the guy. I don't know too much about him. I don't want to disrespect anyone. I'm sure he's a monster in his own right. But I will take Calvin Kattar based on his experience, his variety, and just, the veteran savvy he will have of being in the octagon just a little bit more. Finally, we are to our co-main event for UFC 220. And this one is so there's a couple of different ways this fight goes. And a lot of people tend to think DC is going to walk through Volkan Ozdemir. Part of me agrees. Part of me wants to say, yeah, of course he's going to walk right through him. He's done that to everybody not named John Jones. But a part of me sees something different with Volkan that presents a problem that DC doesn't quite do well with. And that's the length of Volkan Ozdemir and the ability for Volkan to, in the sense, fighters respect each other, through all walks. Of course, you respect your opponent, but when I say that Volkan won't respect him, he won't respect the striking of Daniel Cormier. Volkan Ozdemir is a kickboxer before, turning to MMA. Obviously, he's been training a lot on his defense wrestling, his takedown defense in this fight. But he is a very, very quick starter. Very, very quick starter. DC, not so much. DC is gets into his rhythm, tries to wear you down over a 5-round fight. His pace is unbelievable. He doesn't stop with his pace, but it's not necessarily the most ferocious pace. Volkan Ozdemir, on the other hand, has a ferocious pace. It's, he's coming for your head as soon as the bell rings, and he's swinging big, big shots. I'm not saying that that's the best strategy in against a Daniel Cormier. I think to beat a Daniel Cormier, you need to employ the John Jones strategy, which is the only person that has kept up with that pace, gone shot for shot, pace for pace, and outpointed and then, eventually KO'd Daniel Cormier. But this is a little bit different strategies. And a lot of people akin it to, Rumble Johnson threw big shots. Well, Rumble Johnson did. But at the same time, Rumble Johnson comes from a wrestling background. So when times are tough and, you start to panic a little bit in the octagon, the first thing you go to is your base, right? What do I know better than I know anything else? And he might know how to punch people in the face and throw nasty shots, but at the end of the day, he knows how to wrestle, as a base. That's what he knows how to do better than anything else he knows how to do. And so when you saw in that second fight, especially, Anthony Johnson got clipped a couple times and started wrestling. I don't know if his heart was fully in that fight. He retired immediately after the fight. He said he was going to either way. So I don't know if he was completely in that fight, but I guarantee you one thing. Volkan Ozdemir is coming to fight. This guy is not playing around. He has no intentions of wrestling. He doesn't have any intentions of retiring. This guy is fully focused on that light heavyweight title. And, one shot at 205 can change the fight. 100%. One shot can change the fight. Daniel Cormier hasn't ever been hit with that big shot against, again, anybody named John Jones. But if Volkan were to hit that big, big shot or that big head kick, whatever it is, which he's, adamant, which of every fighter that has heavy hands is going to say he's going to knock the guy out in the first round. Volkan said the same. That's the way you have to beat Daniel Cormier at this point in his career. You know, you're not going to go. Maybe if you have the pace to go with Daniel Cormier for 5 rounds, he is getting a little older, but as a Volkan Ozdemir, he's not going to be able to do that. That's just not how Volkan fights. I don't know if his cardio is where it needs to be to fight a Daniel Cormier. I don't think it would be for 5 rounds in that same pace, or to wrestle with Daniel Cormier. Of course not. You're going to have to hit him and wobble him early and then hurt him, finish the fight. My pick, obviously, I don't think that'll happen. I think Daniel Cormier, like I said, he doesn't lose to anybody not named John Jones, and it's for a reason. The guy has unbelievable pace. He's a better striker than people give him credit for, and I think that might be the downfall of Volkan Ozdemir. I don't think he's given him the credit he deserves and the respect he deserves in his striking game. His dirty boxing is bar none the best in the light heavyweight division. It makes up for his height difference when he gets inside and can, get that Muay Thai plum, or at least the clinch, and throw the nasty uppercuts and then the overhands in there. I think his jab is improving as well. So I'm going to go Daniel Cormier in this fight. And, we'll see what happens. I think that's going to be a Daniel Cormier win and you've seen this with him lately. He's getting a lot of these, tiring guys out and getting a lot of submissions late in fights. So I'm going to go Daniel Cormier, rear naked choke, late third round. That's what we're going to do. And then our main event, and man, I know how many people love to talk about this fight. And I have went over it and over it and over it and over it for the last, I don't even know, since the fight was announced. I think we all have as MMA fans, right? Just how does someone do so-and-so do this? How does Francis beat Stipe? How Stipe combat Francis's power? How do they figure this out? And what the conclusion I've come down to is each fighter has basically one or two ways they win the fight, right? Francis has to win this fight in the first couple of rounds. In my opinion, if Francis gets taken into the 3rd and 4th and 5th round, it means 2 things. It means Stipe's not getting hit, and Stipe's controlling the fight. Pace, distance, whatever it is. If the fight's on the ground, he's controlling it. If it's on the feet, he's controlling it because he's not getting hit, and Francis isn't able to get off big shots. If Francis were to win this fight, he will come out and hurt Stipe early and finish the fight. But I think he can do that in the first or the second round, of the beginning of the round, or as the round goes on. But can Stipe find a way to not get hit? Can Stipe find a way to get inside that monstrous reach of Francis Ngannou and take that fight to the ground, or strike on the inside with Ngannou and disrupt that rhythm that he possesses and sometimes the confidence he possesses, because he is showing no respect to the champ. He thinks the champ's going to be done in one. He says he's not the real champ. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I need to make a pick. And I have one loaded up, but as I talk more and more about it, I don't know. It's just so hard to see Stipe surviving those first 2 rounds against Francis, because of the sheer power and the athletic ability of Francis to be able to control the pace of a fight, because you can't clinch him. Alistair Overeem showed us you can't clinch him. Now, granted, Stipe is a better wrestler than Alistair Overeem is, but is he as strong? Because you could be the best wrestler in the world at 155, but you don't think, and granted, it's a terrible comparison, but Francis Ngannou is a huge man. He's a big guy. Now, Stipe's not much smaller, but Francis possesses this weird power that he just tossed around Alistair Overeem like he was, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, a weight division less than him. And so if he's doing that to Alistair, I don't see why he wouldn't have the same success against Stipe. And that's if Stipe goes in for a clinch. If Stipe just, says, okay, we'll see how bad this dude is. Let's strike. Who's going to be the better striker? Francis, his base is boxing. And I don't know if you want to play that game with a guy that has the hardest recorded punch in the human history. Stipe can definitely win this fight. He can definitely find a way to disrupt Francis Ngannou's rhythm. And he can definitely, find a way. If he can find a way to get him to the ground, he can definitely win the fight. If he can find a way to not get hit in the first couple of rounds and test that gas tank of a Francis Ngannou, he can win the fight. But I'm a big fan of both guys. I have no bias in the fight. I think this is just going to be an amazing fight. I hate even picking it, but we have to pick it. And I am going to go with Francis Ngannou, your new heavyweight champion. And if he beats Stipe, I'm going to look dead in the camera at you guys, and all two of you watching, because my freaking thumbnails are all screwed up today. I'm going to look right in the camera and say, if he wins this fight, Francis Ngannou will not be beat at heavyweight. Hold on. Right here. Right there. If he wins this fight, Francis Ngannou will not be beat by anyone else on the planet unless... Sorry, I had to get dramatic and get the mic out of the way. Unless Stipe can win this fight, you might see Francis reign for the next 3 years. Because the only guy left out there is Kane. And Kane's not the Kane of old. You know, if he can get healthy, then it's a different conversation. But if we see Kane that's injured and Kane that can't push that pace like, you know, we've seen him do in the past and destroy JDS in that second fight, you know, we won't see Francis be deterred by anyone in the next 2-3 years if Stipe can't beat him. So I want Stipe to win. I want Francis to win. I don't know who I want to win more. I think it's just going to be a great fight. I pick Francis because of the sheer knockout ability of this guy and the power he possesses, as well as we haven't really, you know, I've always said this, we tend to think a guy can't do something because we haven't seen him do it. Which is, you know, obviously the safer thing to do, right? To err on the side of skepticism when someone is you know, in a fight where you need to have a universal skill set. And if you don't know if a guy has something or not, usually you would tend to think he doesn't have that. So we haven't seen Francis wrestle that well. We haven't seen Francis go into deeper rounds, so I don't know. My whole thinking is Francis, it doesn't matter. Francis is such a powerful individual and technical individual with his striking that he's going to catch Stipe. I hope I'm wrong, but at the same time, I don't know. I kind of want to be right. We'll see. It's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a good card. I cannot wait for Saturday. And again, guys, I apologize for all of the thumbnail stuff that's going on. I really hope that, because I know that's a big deal for you guys. You see a thumbnail that, oh, okay, Wade's streaming, cool. And you know you'll tune in. So hopefully YouTube will get back to me before Saturday, and we will figure out. Hey, Shogun, what's up, brother? Check out the picks, my man. We've made picks. I apologize. I'm sure that you didn't know I was even streaming because my thumbnails are all messed up right now. I don't know what's going on with them. Hopefully YouTube's going to get back to me on that because I can't put any new thumbnails on my videos. Therefore, obviously no one knows I'm streaming or knows what I'm streaming about. So hopefully we'll have that fixed. I'm going to be streaming on Saturday night. I'm going to be streaming not only UFC events, but I'm going to be streaming the Bellator 192 event as well. So Shogun, tune in on that. My picks are there. All right. Don't at me. I'm taking Cormier. I'm taking Francis. I don't know how confident I am on the Francis pick, but I know that it's a toss-up, man. It's 50-50 in that fight, and there's two ways. Either Francis wins it in the first two, or Stipe wins it in the last three. I don't know how. I don't know. I want to almost go back and switch the pick, but I think Francis catches him early, and I think he hurts him, and that's going to be a difference in the fight. We'll see, though. But, yeah, really quickly, just so you guys know, going to be streaming Saturday night, UFC 220, Bellator 192. We're probably going to do like a 5-hour stream, so get ready for it. Hope you guys get your popcorn ready. Shogun, if you're working, tell your boss it don't matter because we got other work to do. You got to watch the W.A.D.E concept. No, I'm just playing. But everybody tune in. Hopefully I'll have the thumbnail thing fixed. We will be going over a little bit more stuff in the live stream, talking about the direction of the channel, what I want to do with the gaming side of the channel that we're still trying to develop. I know I don't have a PC yet, so it's tough. I want to stream on Twitch on my PC, but I don't I have my Xbox, and I play Fortnite on the Xbox, and I want to play with some of the subs. I think that would be fun, but I don't have the PC set up. So if you guys have Xbox, let me know. And we'll play a couple games. But yeah, we'll be streaming that. We'll be doing Q&As, obviously, in the chat, like always. Come check us out. Merch store coming soon, hopefully. We're still working on the merch store. A couple of different sites I'm working with, like Spreadshirt and Shopify. It's just a headache, so we're trying to figure that out. But we're getting it there because I want you guys to be able to rock the... Oh, by the way, I'm not wearing my sling today, if you guys don't notice. I'm trying to get better. The arm's getting a little better. I'm not going to move it around too much, but I want you guys to have the same kind of merch that I'm wearing because I think it's cool. I think it'd be fun for you guys. It's really, comfortable material, all that good stuff. So hopefully we'll get that figured out. But this has been the MMA Weekly. If you guys didn't catch the first 30, 40 minutes of it, it should be up in like 20 minutes. Go check it out. We talked to Conor McGregor. We talked Khabib versus Tony. We talked Uriah Hall incident. We talked, we'll do this really quickly. Also on that 223 card, and Kelsey will like this, there's going to be they're planning to have the rematch for Joanna and Rose. And I don't want to break it down too much yet, but I think Joanna has a really good shot to beat Rose in the rematch. To set up a trilogy, I think would be crazy. But we'll break it down more as that goes on. But I'm pretty sure they're going to set that up as like the co-main for Khabib versus Tony in the main event of 223. So that's a huge card. And we'll talk about it as it comes. But Rose versus Joanna is a huge, huge fight for that 115 division. And I think it would even be bigger if they had a third fight. And I'll tell you why next time. This is the W.A.D.E concept. We are debating everything. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will have the thumbnail thing figured out, hopefully, by Saturday. Shogun says it's official. That's sick. I didn't know. I know Dana had said it's official. I didn't know if they had officially put it on the card yet, so they got it worked out. That's awesome. We'll talk more about it next time. Until then, again, we are debating everything. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.